I could have taken the easy option and taken the check from Sky, or BSB as it was in the old days, and lay on the beach in Barbados and do very well out of it. But do you know what? It's really important for me and the BTCC and the teams and their sponsors that eyeballs. That's the important thing for us. To go behind a paywall would absolutely ruin the BTCC, I think. And we've got a very good relationship with ITV. Only last year, I did a new 5-year contract with them, so that takes us up to the end of 2026. So it's guaranteed live all day, free to air on ITV until the end of 2026, and that's such a vital contract to do, and it's incredibly important for the teams, as I said, the teams and the sponsors and everyone else.
You're listening to the Mission Makers Show, a podcast that inspires humans to get into the mindset of success. My name's Farah Nanji, and I'm the founder of a business in the motorsports industry that explores leadership lessons from things like Formula One. I'm also a DJ and music producer in the underground electronic scene, and a public speaker on key topics like resilience, building high-performance teams, overcoming learning difficulties, and stimulating creativity. And to tie it all together, I love writing thought-provoking content as a journalist for these industries which are so unique in themselves. On this show, I'm sitting down with some of the most inspiring and driven people I've met around the world to talk about their processes, their failures, the lessons they've learned, and how they are truly making an impact for this world. Hello and welcome back to Season 3 of the Mission Makers podcast. For today's episode, I'm honoured to be joined by the CEO of the BTCC and President of the FIA Touring Car Commission, Alan Gow. Alan has taken the British Touring Car Championship to dizzying heights under his leadership for the last 3 decades, firmly establishing it as the most high-profile series in the UK. As a result, he's received several awards for his work, including Outstanding Contribution to the Motorsport Industry by the MIA at the House of Lords. We talk about the new landscape for the BTCC following the COVID crisis, his philosophies as a leader, and so much more. So just before we begin, if you're interested in some really cool rewards like DJ lessons, the chance to ask our guests questions and exclusive merchandise, head over to patreon.com/missionmakers to check out how you can access these exclusive rewards. And thank you to all of you who've been writing into us and subscribing to the show. It really makes a difference. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you love the content we're making here at Mission Makers, and help us take this show to the next level this season. Alan, welcome to Mission Makers. How are you doing today?
Very good, thank you. The sun's shining, so everything's good.
Yeah, we do love a bit of sunshine here in the UK. Well, talking about sunshine, you are originally from Melbourne, Australia, and you later moved to the UK in your 30s. So take us right back to the beginning. What initially sparked that interest into motorsport, and what was the motorsport scene like in Australia at that time?
Actually, I wasn't interested in motorsport much at all, except one day my sister's boyfriend, he was into motorsport and invited me to go along to a local racetrack called Calder Raceway outside of Melbourne. So I just went along for a day out, and I was absolutely hooked from there on. I thought I loved the sport, and wanted to get involved. You know, not necessarily as a business, but just wanted to get involved in the sport. So I joined a local car club, and just to volunteer and help out at that stage. I think I didn't even have my license then, so I must have been 16 or 17. And joined a local car club to help out at race meetings on the weekends, and that's how I got involved. And then it sort of just grew from there.
That's awesome. And what was the scene like in Australia at that time?
Very good. I mean, Australia is very into its motorsport. There's one major event we have each year called the Bathurst 1000, which is it's a bit like the Grand National in the UK, where everyone watches it. It doesn't matter whether you're interested in motor racing or not. It's a day when everyone sits at home and watches the Bathurst 1000. So it's in our culture. Motorsport's very big in Australia. So it wasn't a left field choice of sports or anything to go into. and a very vibrant sport, and a lot of the big names in motorsport in Australia were and are household names. So it was a great scene, and a great diverse scene of motorsport in Australia too. The only problem you have there is distances, whereas in the UK, within an hour or two, I can go and visit 3 or 4 different race circuits, but in Australia, that'll take me all day.
And when you say diverse, do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
In as much as it's not particularly rooted to open wheel racing or saloon car racing, touring car racing, or rallying or anything, it's really diverse. And in fact, when I first started off in motorsport, open wheeler racing was the big thing. It was called Formula 5000 back in those days. And that was a big part of Australia. And then saloon car, touring car racing took over from there. And it is now, and still is, the major form of motorsport in Australia. And then, of course, we had Formula One. We have a Formula One race once a year. When I was a kid, we didn't. But we had Formula One. We have a Formula One race in Australia once a year. And our Australian Formula One drivers, such as Alan Jones and Mark Webber and now Daniel Ricciardo, are our household names as well. So Australia is not particularly rooted to one particular type of motorsport over another. But we love our sport. Australians love sport, and it doesn't really matter what it is, whether it be football, cricket, motorsport. We just love our sport.
Amazing. And so, what then inspired you to kind of move to the UK?
Nothing inspired me at all. In fact, motorsport was not my business. I had car dealerships in Australia, and I also had a partnership in a race team in Australia. But at the end of 1989, I sort of had a bit of a change of life, and I sold both my business, and at that stage I was also married, so I also got divorced. The two weren't linked at all. But at the end of 89, I thought, for the first time in my life, really, I've got no ties. I can do what I want to do. So I guess, like a lot of Australians, I packed a suitcase and came over here to use it as a springboard to go and see the world, if you like. So I came over here for nothing other than 12 months worth of holiday. Brought one suitcase with me. I knew a few people over here before I came. So I came over here for 12 months, and I'm still here. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't something that I'd ever considered doing, but the circumstances changed. I took advantage of some opportunities that opened up to me over here, and as I said, I'm still here.
That's the beauty of traveling, isn't it? You never know where the actual destination ends up being. Something we like to ask all of our guests on the show is going a little bit deeper into the meaning of their name and see if it has any significance to them, or any maybe any sort of interest to them. And we looked up your name, Alan, and it means harmony. So I'm not sure if you're like into that kind of stuff, or if you read into it, but do you have any thoughts about that?
No, well, I'm not into that sort of stuff at all. But and I don't know if I'm a particularly harmonious person either. A lot of people think that I'm quite gruff and pretty straight up and straight down the line as far as most things are concerned. So I guess I'm not particularly harmonious, but I don't think I'm particularly difficult either.
Well, maybe it's been passed down to your children. I know one of your kids is a musician, so maybe it's been passed on instead, the harmonious note.
Sure.
So we'll go a little bit deeper into your motorsport mind, because you are, of course, very well known as the owner and chief executive of the British Touring Car Championship. So talk to me a little bit about that journey. What sort of, where did that kind of begin for you, and what are you most proud of in that journey?
As far as the British Touring Car Championship goes, it existed before I came over here. Obviously, I was involved in the Australian Touring Car Championship. So when I came over here, the British Touring Car Championship was a much lower level than what we've come to know it in the last 20 or 30 years. And I looked at it, and with a few others, we saw an opportunity of taking it over, or taking the rights to it, and then building it into something better than what it is. So again, it was never part of any grand plan. As I said, I came here for 12 months holiday. But the opportunities opened up. We saw it. And the BTCC has been around for a very long time. It's the third oldest continually running championship in the world. There's Formula One, there's NASCAR, and there's BTCC. So it had a great name, it had a great reputation. It wasn't necessarily at the forefront of everyone's minds because it was at a much lower level than what it became. But I saw an opportunity of taking it further, and so there's 4 of us got together and took over the championship and developed it through the 90s into by far the biggest touring car championship or championship of its type in the world. And then at the end of 2000, we sold it. There was an American company came along and made an offer. It's the old Godfather one. It's the offer you couldn't refuse. So they made us an offer to take over the championship. We thought the timing was right to do that, so we sold it to them. And then that I ceased my involvement with the championship at the end of 2000. And then over the next couple of years, that same American company weren't doing very well out of the championship. So they kept on asking me to come back and manage it and run it for them, which I kept on saying no. And eventually I said yes. So 2.5 years after I sold it, I came back and retook it over and managed it and built it up to, again, what it is now. Because unfortunately, under their leadership, it did very badly. It went backwards. And when I took it over, I had to rebuild it again. And I sort of complain about it now, but I actually enjoyed that. I enjoy the challenge of taking something and building it up. I've done that now twice with the BTCC, very successfully, and I wouldn't have done it the second time if I didn't enjoy doing it.
What were some of the key things that they just weren't getting right once they took over?
Oh, pretty much everything. To be honest, they did a very poor TV deal at the time, so it meant that the vision of the championship around the country was much less than what it should be. So when I took it over, it was only shown on, I think, 3 ITV regions and only like a 40-minute highlights, a week after the race or something. It was a very poor TV package. The crowds had dropped. The grid numbers had dropped. Everything about it was really struggling. So when I took it back over, I think I stood on the back of the grid at Donington, which is the first race that I had it back under my control, and there was only 12 cars on the grid. And that's sort of when I looked at it and thought, oh, what have I done here? I don't know whether I should have done this, but it was just look, in everything, in all aspects, it was just poorly managed. So they took what was obviously a very successful formula and decided they could improve it, and did the opposite. But we see that happen in so many businesses, whether it be food companies or whatever, that a new company takes over, decides to apply their own principles and ideas to it, and it doesn't work. And the BTCC was no different to that.
Of course, that's one of the biggest challenges of M&As. What direction would you like to see for the future of the championship?
Well, do you know what the direction we have? Our direction is largely out of our hands because we don't know what direction actually motorsport is going to take over the next 5 or 10 years. Who would have thought 5 or 10 years ago that motorsport would be in the space it is now, where we're looking at electrification and everything else? So I wish I had a crystal ball, because then I could set the championship on the exact path that we know that is needed. We have 5-year plans, and that's probably as far out as any motorsport can look at, is 5 years at a time. And if you look any further than that, then you're just sort of fooling yourself, and you'll have to redo those plans anyway. So over the next 5 years, starting from next year, 2022, we have hybrid coming in. So hybrid's a very important part of the car market now. And we had to bring in hybrid because we had to make sure that our racing was relevant to not only the car manufacturers, but the audiences and to the world around us. So that may be a transition to full electric in 2027. I don't know. That's a long way away. It could be hydrogen. It could be. We've got ourselves a very good breathing space over the next 5 years to have a look at what technology is going to be like going forward, and then we can adopt those as we go along. But at least we've taken the first step by going hybrid, and we're the first touring car championship in the world to do so. So we'll go hybrid and then look at the landscape over the next 5 years and then make a decision for our regulations 2027 onwards. So what do I see the future of the BTCC? Just that. The future, as I said, is largely out of my hands. What I would like to see the BTCC in 2027 is not necessarily what the BTCC will turn out to be in 2027, because you've got to be adaptable, and you've got to work out what's relevant to the world around us at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And this decade that we're in has been such a disruptive decade, and we can't. Yeah, it's as you say, just planning beyond 5 years is sort of like, you'll find yourself back in the drawing board at the end of that. So, do you?
Well, yeah, and as I said, if someone said to me 10 years ago, look, we'll have to go electrification. We'll have to do partial electrification with hybrid and everything else. I probably would have poo-pooed that idea. But 10 years ago, I don't think anyone was really thinking about that as far as motorsport goes. But now, as I said, things have changed so rapidly. You've got to change with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see yourself kind of wanting to still be part of it in the next decade in the roles that you're in?
I don't know. I'm not getting any younger. I have a 5-year contract to take me up to the end of 2026, and that may see me at that stage. I'll be 70. It depends on my energy levels. I can't imagine what else I'd want to do. But if I still enjoy doing it, and if I still can contribute to the championship as well as anyone else can, then I don't see any reason why I'd stop. But eventually you have to. I'll see how I feel in 5 years' time. There's a long way to go.
Absolutely. So very excited to see what you'll do in this interesting time that we find ourselves in. So one of the amazing things about BTCC is that it stands as one of the highest profile motor racing championships with huge TV audiences, and that's largely due to the fact that it's free to air through ITV, which can't be said for many other kind of competitions in motorsport. Even F1, as we know, is subscription only. So how important is it, do you think, to have this kind of service as a free and accessible for all, particularly as we're a huge crisis where accessibility for motorsport is not easy? So what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I tell everyone that asks. I could have taken the easy option and taken the check from Sky or BSB as it was in the old days, and lay on the beach in Barbados and do very well out of it. But do you know what? It's really important for me and the BTCC and the teams and their sponsors that eyeballs. That's the important thing for us. To go behind a paywall would absolutely ruin the BTCC, I think. And we've got a very good relationship with ITV. Only last year, I did a new 5-year contract with them, so that takes us up to the end of 2026. So it's guaranteed live all day, free to air on ITV until the end of 2026, and that's such a vital contract to do, and it's incredibly important for the teams, as I said, the teams and the sponsors and everyone else. I understand the subscription argument, and financially it's probably very good. In fact, it's obviously very good for the promoter, but I don't think it's great for the championship itself. And we've all seen Formula One. Formula One is incredibly successful, but there's less people watching Formula One now than they did in the 90s in the UK. That's just a fact. When it was on the BBC, it was seen by 3 million people. Now, I think Sky's live cover, the figures are just under 2 million. So I'm after eyeballs, and I think that's really important to get those numbers.
Yeah, no, definitely. And talking of sort of sustainability and the future of motorsport being electric, what are your sort of thoughts on how the BTCC and the industry at large can kind of meet those goals? Do you have any plans to kind of go net carbon, or what are your kind of thoughts on that?
Well, as I said earlier, that's part of the plan over the next 5 years, to have a look at where we go from beyond that. We are doing small things anyway. We are going hybrid, so we're partial electrification already, and that's in step with what's happening around with the motoring world. And we're doing other small things, like next year our fuel will be 20% sustainable, which is twice as sustainable as what you can buy on the forecourts. And we're banning single-use plastics within the BTCC paddock. We're doing all those sorts of things. To take us to carbon neutral will be a really big step, but that's maybe something we can look at over the next 5 years.
Definitely. And with a lot of the actual impact being from logistics rather than race viewing, people coming to the circuit and stuff like that, how can a series really offset that sort of logistics impact?
Fortunately, we're only a national series, so we don't have people flying in from everywhere. So our travel is really just vehicular. So as far as spectators, you can start doing, depending on where the venue is, you can start doing more park and rides and train travel and everything else to the venues. And we can look at that in conjunction with the venues, but I hasten to add, it's the venues that have to look at that, not us. We don't have any control over that. So the venues, and I know the venues are looking at those sort of things going forward. But as I said, fortunately, when you're a national championship, you don't have the huge carbon footprint that the other international championships do. So it's a lot easier for us to offset the carbon footprint and to manage the carbon footprint than the internationals do. I would hate to be an international championship organizer, particularly over the last 2 years with COVID and everything else going on. But also going forward in understanding your responsibilities as far as carbon or moving towards carbon neutrality. I've got a much easier job than most people.
Yeah, no, it helps that it's all in the same country, that's for sure. Yeah. So talking about COVID, I mean, we are still speaking at a time where the pandemic's still around, unfortunately, and motorsport is just starting to bounce back, I guess. What has been the impact for you guys, and how was your journey leading all of this through such times?
Well, again, because I'm a national championship, my journey has been a lot easier than most. I would have hated, as I said, to have been an international championship and having to deal with all the cross-border issues that they've had. We had our own problems, particularly last year. I probably did something like 30 different calendar variations during the course of the year, working out what will happen. We eventually got our year out. Last year, we eventually only lost one race meeting, which was really fantastic for us. So we got 9 out of the 10 rounds. We have 30 races in the year, so we only lost 3 races. And so that was really difficult, but we got through it. And as I said, I don't want to overstate how difficult it was for me, because it wasn't when I compare it to everyone else doing international competitions. And then this year was a lot easier in the UK, of course, because all we had to do is make sure we started at the right time. So we started a little bit later. So I'd done 2020. So 2021 is a lot easier because we just knew what date we had to start at. Given the lockdown situation in the UK, we started a little bit later, and of course we did the whole season without a problem. So 2021 was quite easy for us. Next year, I don't pretend for a minute that the COVID situation has gone away, and next year we'll obviously have to keep our eye on it. But we again again, purposely are starting the season a little bit late next year. We're not starting till the end of April. We thought that was a prudent move, given our experiences of the last couple of years. But as I said, I don't want to overstate difficulties, because there are nothing compared to those to deal with cross competitions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so when you were living back in Australia, you were involved in the Australian racing team run by the legendary Peter Brock. What were your kind of key takeaways from working with the team and with him?
Well, Peter was, and I'm not sure if you know, but Peter was one of the legends, or probably the greatest legend in Australian motorsport. You know, he was literally a household name, and I know it's easy to say household name, but he was a household name. You could talk to anyone who has no interest in motorsport or anything like that, and you'd mention the name Peter Brock, and they'd know who he was. So Peter was probably the most naturally gifted driver I've ever seen. But the biggest takeaway I have with him, he was incredibly good with sponsors and people. Sponsors loved him because he knew how to act and behave in front of them and do all the right things. But more than that, the people adored him because he would spend hours talking to the fans, you know, and there's no prima donna about Peter Brock, even though he had the status of being the highest profile driver in the country. And as I said, you know, a household name. He would walk down the street and people would stop him all the time for an autograph. He could never go anywhere. But after a race meeting, you know, he would stand at the back of his race transporter, and sign autographs and talk to the fans and have photographs taken with him for hours, like hours. We're not talking about, you know, 30 minutes. You know, if a race had finished at 5 o'clock, he'd still be there at 8 o'clock at night in the rain, talking to the fans and dealing with fans. And that was my greatest takeaway from Peter. He was such a people person, and he never complained, because he said, you know what, these people give me my living. They allow me to do what I enjoy doing. The least I can do is give them a couple of hours of my time on a race day. And so that was my greatest takeaway from him. So every time I hear a driver being a bit of a prima donna, you know, and you know, complaining about how many autographs they have to sign and everything else, that really doesn't sit well with me at all.
No, it's part of the job, and it's the responsibility as well that you take on when you become a public figure. So it's great to hear that he was.
But it's like any job; you can choose to do it willingly or begrudgingly, you know. But you should do it anyway. So if you're going to do it, you might as well do it willingly and enjoy it, instead of standing there, you know, bemoaning the.
Hey you! We hope you're enjoying today's episode. We're on a serious mission here to create one of the world's best podcast series, and we'd be so grateful if you could support us in any way by becoming a patron of the show. There's a tier to suit every level, from early bird tiers where you get downloads to all my music with some super cool ninja stickers, to our VIP Mission Maker tiers where you get epic rewards like exclusive footage that never gets aired, the chance to submit questions to our guests with signed copies of books from them, DJ lessons, one-to-one coaching, and a whole load of super cool Ninja Mission Maker merchandise. You can start supporting us for less than what it costs you to fill up your car for a month by simply heading over to www.patreon.com/Mission Makers. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
The fact that you have to sign autographs.
Definitely, that's not going to go away ever. So, yeah, exactly. You may as well roll up your sleeves and find some sort of happiness within it.
Exactly right.
Definitely agree. You've also been a behind-the-scenes catalyst for many important contributors to the sport, such as Lando, Norris, and Michael Masi. So, talk to me about that, and also what you first saw in them when you started working with them.
Oh, I don't know about Lando Norris. I mean, Lando was merely a driver in our support races. So I knew Lando from a very early age, and I knew his father from a very early age. And in fact, I introduced his father to Zach Brown, who runs McLaren.
Exactly.
And that was, I started that relationship with him. But I can't stake any claim to Lando's success at all. You know, he was a great little driver, and he was doing genetic juniors in our support race championships. That's when I first saw him. Michael Masi. Michael, I gave him his first job in motorsport. He worked for me in Australia. In Australia at that stage, I had a company called Tow for Australia, which is running a series down in Australia. And Michael was just a young guy out of Sydney, and we gave him some weekend work, and then gave him a full-time job, and that was his first full-time job in motorsport. And then he went on from there, and now he's a Formula One race director. And I take a bit of pride in the fact that I had something to do with that.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate the insight into Lando as well, and I appreciate it may not have been a very, like what you said, but definitely that introduction to Zach Brown. I mean, his course could have maybe been different had that not happened. So there's definitely some stuff in there.
Well, you might be right, but Lando is such a talent that he would land. Don't worry, he would landed where he was anyway. So I don't really take a claim. All I did is probably make it a little bit easier for him.
Sure, absolutely. So we are connected by your lovely wife, who her and I met through the FIA Girls on Track, which was Dare to Be Different back then. And something I do like to ask all my guests as well, whichever industry they come from, is about sort of women in leadership and women in motorsport, women in music. So talking about motorsport, I mean, what are your thoughts on it? How do you believe we can get more women, not only just as drivers, but also into the top roles of the motorsport industry?
My thoughts are hopefully the same as everyone else, and that is there's no reason why women can't be successful within motorsport, and they are at all levels. I mean, if you're talking about Formula One, everyone concentrates on there's no female Formula One driver. Okay, no, there isn't. One day there probably will be, but no, there isn't. But that doesn't mean that women aren't successful in motorsport. There's been very successful drivers from in all forms of motorsport, whether it be touring cars, whether it be Indy cars, whether it be sports cars, whatever. There's all sorts of successful females involved in motorsport. And then off track, there's very important females involved throughout the sport. FIA level, at local level. I honestly don't understand the argument of why can't we get more women involved in motorsport? They are involved in motorsport. There's no barrier to them being involved in motorsport, and I deal with them all the time. I deal with women in motorsport every day, so I don't see this sort of glass ceiling that the people talk about. But unfortunately, the focus seems to be always on Formula One, and people seem to think that the value of women in motorsport is seen as you have to have a Formula One drive, and I don't agree with that. I just don't. There's fantastic female drivers in all sorts of classifications. If one gets into Formula One, or one or two get into Formula One, and they don't win a race or don't win a championship, it doesn't mean anything. That just means there's 19 other guys in there that don't win races or championships too. So I'm probably saying it very bad, but I just don't get the whole why are we worried about women in motorsport. I see them, as I said, every day as engineers. Every BTCC team in our pit lane has a female race engineer. And multiple females working for the teams. We had 2 drivers last year, which are female drivers. So I don't see the problems of females in motorsport. I just think they're part of motorsport, and that's just part of they're part of the makeup of motorsport. Formula One is a different thing, but maybe a girl will get into Formula One soon and shut other people up as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the whole world is waiting for that moment. But yeah, as you say, if they lose or win, it will be, as you say, 19 other drivers who don't get that sort of win. So they're I think they're also, there's this kind of like fear, I guess, of like how will they get eaten up really by the public, which is sad. But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
It will, but it's a shame. It's a shame, as I said, that people are there's an expectation that women the females in motorsport, the value will only be seen if there's one in Formula One, and I just think that's so wrong. There's females in all branches of motorsport winning races and doing very well.
I mean, one of the things I think is also that because of the internet and because of, let's say, the changing hands of Formula One as well, and how there's been a lot more insight into the actual workings of Formula One, and also different motorsport championships. And I think now there is more of a kind of like spotlight, and there's more interviews and things like that, and people are seeing you've got fantastic women who are part of the sport, and then obviously you do need kind of like what the FIA is doing with Girls on Track, like a place like that which starts from the grassroots and kind of plants the seed at a young stage. So that's for sure. So you are at the sort of top of the motorsport industry. You've been in there for a while, and you've affected real change and growth. So in terms of the actual future of the sport, and I know we've touched on it a little bit, but what are the sort of top 3 things that you want to see for the future of this sport as a whole?
Wow, that's a big question. I don't know if there's anything that stands out that the sport should be doing that it's not actually now addressing. I think the sport has been very good at identifying what it needs to do, certainly as far as the near-term outlook is. They've identified inclusiveness. They've identified women. That's why they've got women. Their own women motorsport program. They've identified the sustainability aspects, environmental aspects. I think motorsport just has to be a little bit careful going forward of the environmental aspects, and to ensure that we have a sport that is enjoyable, but people can't look at too harshly and start question why we're having motorsport. That's the last thing I want to see happen. So motorsport has to behave responsibly, and in order to secure its place in the world. I would hate it to ever become the pariah where people look at it and say we shouldn't be doing the sport. So we've got to be very careful on that going forward. But other than that, I think the sport is addressing it pretty well. I'm involved in the FIA at many different levels, and there are all sorts of programs going forward to address where the sport should be in the world and how it should be conducting itself. So I'm not sure I have 3 things that I could identify that absolutely need to be done, but certainly the environmental aspect is key, because that will set the agenda for how the sport is looked at going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And from sort of what you've been involved with the FIA and your observations of the industry, I mean, what do you personally think can be done to kind of level the playing field a little bit in terms of the financial barriers that definitely exist?
No, that's difficult. Sport has always been incredibly expensive. Yeah. It's obviously more expensive now than ever has been, but so is everything else. So is your house. So is your car. Everything is expensive. So it's silly to look back on 20 or 30 years ago and look at how cheap sport was, because then you'd have to also look at how cheap, as I said, your car or your furniture or your house is. So it's unfortunate, but motorsport is to a large degree an elite sport, because it requires money to operate at a much higher level than you do if you want to go and do athletics or football or whatever. Certainly at the lower ranks. So I don't know if financially you can level up the sport. I really don't. I think you'll always have those sorts of disparities in the cost of competition and the cost of entry. Yes, there's other things that the sport can do in order to make the cost of entry into the sport as low as it can be. But as you go up the ranks, you'll always hit the hurdle of, this is how much it's going to cost. This is how much it's going to cost. And any sport that uses equipment like this, yachting is a very good example. we can all start off yachting by going and getting a really cheap little boat and waddle around the Solomon. But once you start getting up, you're talking about millions and millions and millions of pounds in yachting. It's the same thing. When you're using sophisticated equipment, the costs go up accordingly. So I don't know what you can do to level up the sport, but all you need to do is make sure that the entry level is as reasonably and financially as practical as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that being said, a season in karting could be 100 grand. So,
it doesn't have to be. That's the problem. We've allowed it to become 100 grand. A season in karting with a lot more controls can be a lot less than that. We've allowed it to become that much. It's when you get into motor racing, and particularly nowadays where you've got such high safety standards, is the costs go up. In the old days, people would say, well, you go from karting into Formula Ford. And Formula Ford in those days was a very cheap space frame chassis, single-seater with sort of road tyres on it and everything else. People don't want to race those sort of cars anymore. They want to race a carbon fibre tub with the halo and all the safety equipment they can, because a father is not going to strap his 15-year-old son into anything but the safest racing car he can put him into, and that costs money. And that's the unfortunate part about it. That costs money. So as the sport, as you go up the ladder in the sport, it costs more and more because the safety aspect goes up accordingly, and then you've got all the other programs around it that you have to do to control the car.
No, definitely. When you say that it doesn't have to be 100k, is that, are you referencing that the same point there about safety, or is there more the kind of maybe the profitability side of it more that you're referencing?
No, I think it's just more the profitability side of it. I haven't looked at karting for a long time, but the last time I did, there was an extraordinary amount of money spent in karting, where there was a lot of, had transporters full of engines and spare chassis and everything else. And karting was always meant to be, I know I'm probably being a bit too simplistic, but it was always meant to be dad and a lad on the trailer and taking it down and having a go. I shouldn't have said lad, but a dad and their son or daughter going off in karting. But now it seems to be that the karting is much more professional, much more expensive. So therefore, you are looking at £100,000 for a karting season. And all I'm saying is it doesn't have to be that, because the karts aren't that much different to how they were 20 or 30 years ago. Yeah. They haven't got the safety standards and the carbon fibre chassis and everything else that racing cars have. So there's no reason why it should be £100,000. So, the karting authorities need to have a look at that so they can make the entry level, a lot cheaper than that.
Definitely. Well, thanks for sharing your insight onto that. In your journey, has your leadership style changed or varied between the organizations you're involved with or the teams that you're working and running?
I don't think it has. I don't think I have a particularly brilliant leadership style anyway. But what I'm quite good at is empowering the people that work for me. And the people that work for me have worked for me for a long time. Now I have my technical director, Peter Riches, who has been with me since 1994, I think. My coordinator has been with me since 2003. The PR agency that I use has been with me since the mid-90s. I'm very loyal to the people who work for me, but I'm only loyal because I trust them and they know what they're doing. And I don't think for a minute that if I got run over by a bus tomorrow, they wouldn't need me to carry on with the work that they're doing. They know exactly how to do it. They know when to do things and how to do things. They know how I want things done. So I'm very good at, once I trust someone and once I've given them all the knowledge they need to, I leave them to it. They know what to do and I empower them to do it. So that's my management style. There's a few very firm things that they know, and that is that I must know everything. I'm a bit of a control freak as far as that's concerned. So they have to tell me everything that's going on, and they can never not tell me something that's gone wrong. Because I need to be the first to know when something is a problem, not the last person to know. If I'm the first person to know, I can help them fix that problem and we can move on. And let's face it, problems come up all the time. So that's, there's some of my golden rules. I'm the first to know, and never the last. But there's also other things that I give to them, that I continually let them prove themselves to me. And then after they prove themselves, I'll give them the freedom. So initially I won't. I'm a bit of a control. I'm very much a control freak. But once they've proven their ability to do it, I won't keep on questioning it. I'll let them do it, and just get on with it. But I don't have a particularly brilliant management style. My great failing, and I admit it to everyone, is that I'm very bad at congratulating people on a job well done. I come from the basis of, why should I congratulate someone if they've done the job that I paid them to do? And that's not a particularly brilliant way of managing, but that's the sort of way I was always brought up. So I'm really poor at congratulating my people when I should do. And no matter how often I admit it that that's a failing, I still haven't been able to correct it. So the people that work for me are used to it. They know that they don't get a big pat on the back every day, but they know that they're appreciated and respected in many other ways.
Very interesting. Well, thanks so much for sharing that with us. And yeah, the first step of change to anything is awareness. So that's always one thing. So we're going to go into our audience Q&A, and actually the first question that we've got sort of ties into these insights that you're sharing with us about your sort of leadership style and things. And this question comes from Louise in Germany, and she asks, what's your number one piece of advice for anybody wishing to start their own business?
The number one piece of advice is just do it. I come from the JFDI syndrome, and I guess you know what JFDI means. But that's, and I think that's from being Australian. But that's what I've always done. I'll just do it. You can sit around and strategize and think about something all the time and wonder if you should do it, and then that moment will pass. Have a look at it. I always look at what's the worst that can happen. If I fail doing that, what's the worst that can happen? And if I'm not afraid of the worst thing that can happen, then I do it. You should never do something if you're afraid of failure.
No, definitely. Very, very good advice there, and definitely agree, because by the time you've sat there sort of thinking so in depth about it, which you need to do obviously to a certain degree, but the world moves so fast that time waits for no one. So
yeah, and as I said, if you're afraid of failure, then you'll never be truly successful at it, because you'll always be protecting the failure part of it. So you've just got to make up your mind that you're going to do something and do it, and you've taken into consideration the failure aspect and what can go wrong. Once you've come to grips with that and say, okay, I can handle that if it goes wrong, then you just do it.
Exactly. So this question is from Liam in London, and he asked, what's your favourite race circuit in the UK?
This is probably a bit one that probably a lot of people won't think of, and it's called Croft Circuit, which is up in the north, up near Darlington. It's in a nice part of the world, but as a race circuit to drive on, it's a really good circuit. It's a combination of twisty, fast sections. It's a great circuit to drive on. So it's probably not everyone's first choice, because most people will come up with Brands Hatch, Silverstone or Donington, and maybe Thruxton. But Croft is actually my favourite, because I actually enjoy driving around it. So and it produces good racing as well.
What do you enjoy driving around there?
Well, I have an arrangement with Porsche, so I have a Porsche supply me with our official cars. So this year I have a Porsche Panamera Turbo S, which is an incredible car. It's 640 horsepower and 4-wheel drive twin turbo V8. It's an incredible car. So that's what I enjoy driving at.
Nice. So we're going to go into our final section, which is our quickfire round, and we've got 5 questions for you, and not more than 60 seconds on each. So do you have a favorite driving song?
I don't think I do. I've never listened to. I hardly ever listen to music. So the answer is no. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Do you have a all-time hero in the motorsport industry?
In the industry or in the sport?
Oh, sorry, in the sport, I should say.
Peter Brock.
Okay, fair enough. We hear that you've held a pilot's license for a number of years. Do you prefer flying or being on the open road?
I prefer driving, particularly as long as it's the right road and the right car.
True. As an Australian, home and away or neighbours?
Oh, neither. But I've never watched either. So
really,
either. No.
Wow.
Never was neither.
Okay. And lastly, Alan, something we love to ask all our guests at the end is, what are you most grateful for this month?
This month? The fact that I'm still alive and healthy. And as you get older, you get more appreciative of how you're feeling. But I love my life, and I'm healthy and happy, and that's all I can be. That's all I can wish for.
Yeah, no, definitely, especially in these times. Well, Alan, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure to hear your thoughts, and we really appreciate your insights. And thanks so much.
My pleasure. Good to talk to you.
You too. If you want to grab a copy of today's show notes, then head over to missionmakers.com/Alan Gow, where you'll also find notes from all of our previous episodes. We've got some amazing guests coming on the show this season, so be sure to share the show with your friends and subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you listen to your podcasts. You can reach out to me at Mission Makers or at dj.n1nja on Instagram. And if you're interested in supporting the show and getting some really cool rewards like virtual DJ lessons and exclusive merchandise, don't forget to visit patreon.com/Mission Makers. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep it laser focused.